over the last couple of days, one of the most important conversation that's been going on online, offline, almost everywhere is extension of the tenure of the police IG Kayode Egbetukun. Well, that and also the conversations involving President Trump's executive order and the implications for Nigeria in particular, but of course Africa on a global scene. Well, today on the newsroom, we'll take a critical look at these two issues and try to answer some of those burning questions that may have been on your mind. At 16 minutes gone past the 6 o'clock hour, that is my cue to welcome you to another edition of the newsroom. Good evening, wherever you are listening to Nigeria's number one talk station. My name is Ufuoma Egbamuno, and on behalf of the newsroom of Nigeria Info FM, Cool FM, and Wazobia, I bid you welcome to another bumper package of the show. If this is the very first time you are joining us, well, the newsroom is a program where we take a critical look at some of the big stories that have made the rounds in the course of the last 7-8 days, more give or take, just last week. And that's what we try to do on the show. Okay, just before we get into the two major conversations we've got for you this evening, let me remind you of some of the big stories we as the newsroom covered and brought you some of these stories in the course of the last 7 days. From the political angle, let's let you know that, of course, the new Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, Mojisola Merinda, officially assumed office, and the APC expelled former Osun State Governor, former Commissioner right here in Rivers State, and of course, just under the last APC administration, former Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola. That's, of course, in politics. Let's also let you know that the Anambra State government bust a kidnapper hideout and uncovered shrine and 30 well-partitioned graves in a supposed hotel. One of the big stories, again, from the southeast was that NAFDAC sealed the popular cemetery market in Aba over production of fake food and beverages. We also got a big story as it concerns the legal action against human rights activist Dele Farotimi. We saw, of course, legal luminary Chief Afe Babalola withdrawing his suit. Okay, other stories we brought to you here. We told you, of course, that Nigeria secured a $1.1 billion loan from the African Development Bank to power electricity for at least 5 million people this year and next year. Another big story from last week was the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority suspending Max Air from domestic flight operations for 3 months, and it took effect from January 31st, and that happened after a near mishap in Kanu. Talking about mishaps, we had about 3 dangerous ones in the United States, which of course led to deaths. The most popular one, the one that happened in Washington, D.C., involving a helicopter and of course an airline. Back here, the EFCC admitted glitches in their recent car auction, which of course caused a lot of controversy. And we saw the Justice Minister Lateef Fagbemi confirming that the IGP of police will serve his full 4-year term. I'll come to that in a bit. And from tomorrow, the 4th of February, the Nigeria Labour Congress has insisted it will go ahead with its nationwide protest, even as great news for Lagos State is set to launch a 500 million farmers subsidy intervention program. But like I did mention to you at the start of the show, our two big conversations for today will start with, of course, the extension of the IGP's tenure. To be very honest, I have been slightly shocked or slightly surprised over the last few days that this particular conversation has dominated the airwaves, almost everywhere. It feels like, because I remember here on Nigeria Info sometime last year, around August or thereabout, I remember calling out this particular incident when the Senate at the time, in a space of 24, in fact, it was not even up to 24 hours. It was one day. It went first reading, second reading, third reading, and they sorted it out that day, And I remember saying, hey, it's not making the headlines now. People are not talking so much about it, but that's something that is a very, very dangerous trend. In case you don't understand what I'm saying, well, the IGP of police, Egbamuno, was supposed to officially bow out of the police force last year when he reached the mandatory 60 years. Now, you reach 60 years or you've served for 35 years. You are not supposed to go beyond that. But the National Assembly, the Senate, had that one-day sitting, amended the Constitution, amended the Police Act in such a way that, well, Egbamuno can stay in power legally until October 2027. And the question I asked that day was, is this a question of already preparing for the 2027 election? Because, of course, his extension date was going to be well after the elections coming up in, is it 2 years? 2 years' time. Well, it took possibly a battle or legal action involving former presidential aspirant and, of course, publisher Molaye Sowore to sort of bring this consciousness back to Nigerians. And yes, the Attorney General is well within his right. The IGP of police is right there legally. There's nothing you can do about that because, of course, the Constitution has been amended. But we saw the Police Service Commission last week, order that anybody who has crossed the 60-year mark or who served up to 35 years in the police force should, of course, be retired. Like I did say, that's going to be our conversation today. We've got the executive director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, RULAC for short. RULAC is a non-governmental organization that promotes the rule of law, accountability, and human rights in Nigeria. It has been involved in various initiatives, including police reform, human rights advocacy, justice sector reform, and community development. And I'm glad to say the executive director of the center, Okechukwu Nwanguma, is joining us live via Zoom. A very good evening to you, sir. Welcome to the newsroom right here on Nigeria Info.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me.
All right, I've tried to lay the foundation of the conversation we about to have. But, for the benefit of those who might need a little more insight, could you just explain to us the circumstances that surrounded the extension of the IGP's tenure in office till October 2027?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Let me start by saying that this matter has generated widespread public outcry and debates. But this is not the first time we are experiencing or witnessing attempt by sitting presidents to extend the tenure of IGPs, Inspector General of Police, whose tenure in office had expired. Under President Buhari, we had two instances where two Inspector General of Police had their tenures extended. But what makes this different in this case of Egbamuno is that the president went ahead to sponsor an executive bill aimed at amending the Police Act 2020 and inserting a clause that will, of course, I think he tried to beat the old arguments against such practice. You know? So this Police Act, as you know, was passed in 2020 and signed into law by President Buhari, and provided a tenure, a secure tenure for the Inspector General of Police. The idea was to cure the problem in the past where an IGP would be appointed and he doesn't know when he will leave office. So he stays in office without security of tenure. There was no stability of leadership. There was no time for long-term visioning and planning.
True.
So it was contemplated that to cure this, it was important to give a sitting IGP a 4-year secure tenure. Now, the Police Act, in providing for a 4-year tenure, was minded by the public service rules, which governs the retirement of public servants, including police officers, which is exactly why last week the Police Service Commission issued a directive that all police officers who had served for 60 years or who had attained 60 years of age or served for 35 years in accordance with the public service rules should retire. So the problem is, why would one man be singled out? And I think that is what the problem is. And a lot of police officers, senior police officers, who are mates to Mr. Egbamuno are being forced to retire because they have attained 60 or then there are others who ought to climb up the ladder. Mr. Egbamuno's continued stay in office after he's attained 60 years has undermined their career progression, and there is a lot of discontent within the police, as it were. And I think that is not good. A lot of people have focused the argument on legality. But what is beyond legality, there are other issues. Issues about not following the due process, issues about favoritism, and issues about legitimacy of a process and its outcome. And I think that is where the problem lies.
I wouldn't totally disagree with you, because I would assume, and I've heard quite a number of Nigerians saying this, that when it comes to bills or legislative duties that sorts of benefits, the average Nigerian, it takes a lot of time for the National Assembly to get ahead with it, but when it comes to issues that solve their parochial tendencies, so to speak, because I remember vividly, and the reason I'm quite passionate about this is that 5-6 months ago I did talk about this, well, maybe not in this with this amount of time, but I remember calling this out because I did see that news and I was wondering why in just one day, first reading, second reading, third reading, amended the Police Act with such speed, which brings me to my second question, which is the fact that the current IG, used to be the chief security officer of the president during his tenure as governor of Lagos State.
Of Lagos State, yeah.
Exactly, and you did mention favoritism, and I'm beginning to wonder if that has become a pattern for presidents, because every time you bring out all of these things, the first question or the first thing put out to you is, well, President A did this, President B did that, so it's really not out of place for President C to do that. Are we beginning now to justify some of our actions that might not be illegal, because of course, because it's gone through the process via the National Assembly, you can't necessarily call it illegal, but it raises a lot of questions, and like you pointed out, is favoritism or is political considerations beginning to play into some of these appointments? And I'm wondering, like so many other Nigerians.
So you would expect that when a law is made or a law is amended, it is supposed to be in public interest. But what has happened, and first of all, like you rightly mentioned, this Mr. Beto, who was the Chief Security Officer to President Tinubu when he was governor of Lagos State, the bill to amend the Police Act emanated from the president. It was an executive bill. Now, for the first time in the history of legislative action in Nigeria, a bill as critical as the Police Act, a bill to amend the Police Act, was passed through the first reading, second reading, and third reading in one sitting and was approved without public consultation. There was no public hearing. It is unheard of that such a bill could be amended with such a speed without public consultation through public hearing. And so it is obviously a politically self-serving action that was intended to achieve through manipulating the legislative process in order to achieve a self-serving purpose of keeping one particular man as Inspector General of Police, in spite of the fact that he had reached the age of retirement, and despite the internal rumblings that this has caused, there is a lot of misgivings within the police, and the implication of this. And the danger in this is that if this is not challenged, the danger is that it becomes a bad precedent. Tomorrow, the president can wake up tomorrow and amend any other law with such speed, without sensitivity to public opinion, and then have his way, And of course, it becomes legal because, of course, it is within the powers of the National Assembly to make laws or to amend laws.
True.
But the question is, in whose interest? In whose interest? And if there was nothing wrong about it, we wouldn't be having this level of outcry and debate that has accompanied. In a normal society, the president would have been forced to rethink, and ask this man to go. And there are so many better qualified senior police officers who are waiting to be appointed Inspector General of Police. Why must it be one man? So for me, it raises more of issues of legitimacy, issues of rule of law, issue of compliance with legal procedures, established legal procedure, than the legality. You could cloak an act in legality. It could have a semblance of legality, but does it have legitimacy? How does it attract public trust? You can see that this is going to erode public trust in the institution called the police, an institution that is already, already
doesn't have as much public trust
with its legitimacy.
All right,
public trust and yeah.
Oh, okay. Lagos, if you just joined us, this is the Newsroom. My name is Ufuoma, and of course, I've got the Executive Director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, Okechukwu Nwanguma. I would need to ask you this question now. You talked about, you hinted a lot more, on the rule of law and all of that. What does this whole drama, what's the implication for the rule of law in Nigeria, which already has a bit of a, for want of better word, has trust issues already, amongst a lot of Nigerians. But what does this particular issue now, what does it do to the rule of law in Nigeria?
I mean, just like I earlier mentioned, without the rule of law, democracy cannot survive. And when you talk about democracy, you talk about transparency, you talk about accountability, not just to the president, but accountability to the law and accountability to the people. So when the National Assembly believe that they can do whatever they like, because if you remember, the Senate presided over by Godswill Akpabio had during their inauguration, sang that on Jagaban's mandate they stand. Mm-hmm. That they stand on the president's mandate and made a commitment that whatever the president asked of them, that they will give him, that he already has it even before he asked. So it means that these people are not driven by the need to operate by the rules, but they are more propelled by the interest of the president and their own selfish interest as a people. Look at the whole thing about, even beyond this issue of, amending the Police Act. Look at the issue of the budget process, all the scandals around, the way what I could easily describe as legislative recklessness, which means that they are not guided by, the law, complying with the law as it were, driven by the interest of the people, but by what pleases the president and what pleases themselves as a political class. And I think that this is dangerous for our democracy. What this does is that it destroys public trust. And without public trust, it means that people will not, trust the institutions. And that is why we have a lot of cases of self-help. People resort to self-help rather than, relying on government and the law to address grievances. So it means that this country is not governed by the rule of law, but by the interests of the president and the political class. And it is dangerous for democracy. And I think that the president needs to show leadership and show that he has respect for public opinion and try to address this widespread outcry about the process by which this thing has happened. And I think that it is not too late for him to retrace his steps.
Funny you said that. I would argue that it would be a lot easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than have the extension of Egbetokun's tenure rescinded. I will sit here and bet my salary for February that it's not going to happen. On a final note,
well, happily.
Go ahead. You wanted to say something?
Yeah. I was just going to say. Yes, I was just going to say that I think it is important that this matter be taken before the law courts. Let it be subjected to legal or judicial scrutiny. Let's see if it can survive. If it does, even if it does survive legal scrutiny, I'm not sure it will survive legitimacy. Because it's more about legitimacy. It's more about how do the people,
perceive it?
Perceive what has happened. How do the people support what has happened? To what extent is it in the interest of the people? So it is for the government, for the president to decide whether he wants to serve public interest or wants to serve his own political interest and the interest of his friends and cronies.
Okay, the cynic in me would let me not say what the cynic in me would is already thinking about this whole subjecting it to legal scrutiny. But on a final note, how do you think this issue would impact the effectiveness of the police and, of course, morale amongst officers?
And this is a key issue, about this whole thing, because, like I told you,
oh dear, what's happening to our connection? Oh dear, Lagos. Well, it looks like we just
very much aware.
Hold on, sir.
The police officers would not.
Hello.
They will not speak.
Hello. Could you start all over again? Yeah. We had a bit of.
I'm still here.
Okay, we had a bit of a connection issue, so we didn't hear you.
I was. Yes, I was saying that this thing has created serious discontent among senior police officers, particularly those whose career progression has been stunted or undermined by Ibetoku still remaining in office. So, and what it means is that these people are not happy, and they may not speak out, but one way or the other, they will find a way to take revenge against the system. There will be no unity of purpose. There will be no, I mean, they're going to do everything to undermine the system in order to take revenge. And this also can impact on national security, which is why it is important that, care must be taken to ensure that this thing is resolved in a just and prompt way.
All right, I guess that's a great place to actually leave this conversation. Lagos, we have been speaking to the Executive Director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, RULAC, Mr. Okechukwu Nwanguma. Thank you very much for joining us on the newsroom this evening.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
All right, Lagos, we're moving straight to the second part of the show. And on this particular part of the show, a lot has been going on in the United States of America that has direct impact right here on the continent in general, but especially as it concerns Nigeria. Well, the recent executive order by the president of the United States to put a bit of a freeze on U.S. foreign development assistance to countries on the continent and, of course, other parts of the world, has generated a whole lot of conversations. First, of course, the U.S. has withdrawn from the World Health Organization, and that already on its own has loads and loads of complications, you might want to say. But also, one of complications, by the way, on the health sector, but also one of the issues is the fact that people living with AIDS or the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, have also, in one way or the other, been affected. And to a large extent, this has actually become a bit of an issue for some persons. Well, last week, the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, granted an emergency humanitarian waiver allowing the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief to continue providing life-saving HIV medications to some low-income countries. Rubio approved an exemption of critical humanitarian efforts, including medical aid, food, and shelter. Well, this will allow people to continue accessing HIV treatment funded by the United States across 55 countries worldwide. Now, that's after all of the, I don't know if hula baloo is the right word to use, that came as a result of the original order by President Trump. Well, I remember talking to a couple of my colleagues, friends, last week, and I mentioned, it was at our editorial meeting last week, Thursday. That's when I said this. I remember growing up as a child in the 80s and the early 90s, how much of a big deal HIV AIDS was across the world. Maybe it does not get the level of, say, coronavirus from 5 years ago, but it was still a big deal back in the day. Well, as a result of funding from the United States and other wealthy countries, over time, as much as the scourge is still there, it has not had the same devastating effect. At a point in time in my life, if you contract HIV, that's a death sentence. But now it's no longer so. And many have feared that, with this new policies from the United States, we could drag ourselves back to the 80s and early 90s. We've got a Nigerian joining us on the show this evening who is living with the ailment, and we want to speak to him about all of this drama. His name is Patrick Akpan, and he's joining us right here on Nigeria Info at this point in time. A very good evening to you, sir. Welcome to the newsroom right here on Nigeria Info.
Thank you very much.
All right, I will start by asking you what your thoughts were when, this whole policy of halting, like having a 90-day halt on the funding of PEPFAR, the Global AIDS Program, which of course takes care of a lot of the treatment and care of persons living with AIDS. Well, when the news broke, how did you feel?
It was a very shocking situation because I know the number of people that are taking ARV in Lagos, for instance, and even in Nigeria is quite large. And I also understand that I know that it is largely funders driven. So when I heard that the U.S. president has halted funding for 90 days, I was deeply shocked, and I began to think, what do we do? What can we do as a network? How are we going to cope with the situation when, if at all, it happened that it takes longer than expected? What are we going to do? Some people need to take their medications, and you have to live with this drug every day. You have to take a pill, at least a pill every day. So if this drug is no longer available, how are we going? What will become of people living with HIV? So I was really, really worried.
Okay, maybe I should go back to the question I should have asked you first. How has it been like for you as a person living with HIV? How has it been like for you right here in Nigeria?
Well, for me, when without the halting of the funding by U.S. government, I do not have much a problem because for me, I've lived above stigma. I have even, I'm an advocate, I am leading the network and all that. So for me, I'm not having any problem with that. But I also know that a lot of people are having a lot of problems. There are still denials. People are still saying, oh, it's not over my dead body.
It's not my portion.
And all that. We know about that, and we have. I don't know whether we are also aware that people are still dying of AIDS-related illnesses because so many people refuse to take the medication, and they will claim that some of them will go to prayer houses and claim that they have been cured, and after some time, the HIV can stay in somebody's body for quite some time, and without showing much sign. And by the time the immune system has been broken down, the person will come down and maybe turn vegetable, and they will wheel the person to the hospital, and maybe some of them won't make it. So for me, as a person, at the beginning of it, it was a difficult thing for me, but for now, I think I have overcome.
All right. Now, some persons have argued that a lot of African countries, Nigeria inclusive, have more or less abandoned some of their responsibilities because they depend too much on some of these donations from foreign countries. That maybe this is the wake-up call that our governments need to be able to pay close attention to the health sector. What do you say to that?
Yes, I think if we have people who are saying so, they are right. And I'm one of the people that are saying so as well. I believe this is a wake-up call for the government of Nigeria. And though for me, I envisage this coming one day. Even if this one did not come, it will surely come one day. There is no way for international donors to continue to fund our HIV program. In fact, before now, they've already started winding up. They've already told us that we have to have integration. There is issue of sustainability. There is a plan that they are going to hand over to Nigeria's government. But it was not to be sudden like this. It wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be a gradual process.
Okay.
So it's really a wake-up call, and this has really come back to show that Nigerian government have to wake up to their responsibility. They have to do something. They're supposed to have been doing more than what they are doing right now. Because if they had been doing what they are doing more than, if they have been doing what they are doing, what is happening now wouldn't have been, the shock wouldn't have been so much like this. Because we are so dependent on foreign.
Here's me guessing that our guest may have unknowingly touched some button on his phone and put himself on what do you call it again? Call waiting. Yeah. Hello. Oh dear. All right, I guess we would have to. I just had one more question to ask our guest. I guess we might probably have to leave it at that, even as my producer, Emmanuel Onwoka, is trying to see if he can get back to Mr. Patrick Akpan, who's a Nigerian living with HIV/AIDS. I guess we'll have to leave it at that. But, my last question to second guest is quite pivotal because you would argue, that how is it that African governments, African presidents will fly private jets, go cap in hand, asking for donations from countries whose presidents, possibly, or prime ministers are coming to such global events not on private jets, but going through the commercial airlines, and you begin to ask yourself, do we actually have, and I'm talking Nigeria now, let me leave the rest of Africa, do we actually have a funding problem, or we have a spending problem? Because on one hand we're complaining, there's no money, but you look at how much priorities some of our governments, and I'm talking at all levels, local government, states, and the presidency, the amount of money sometimes we spend beggars belief. Anyway, that's our show this evening. Thank you to my guests, the RULAC Executive Director, Mr. Okechukwu Nwanguma, who was here, and of course, Mr. Patrick Akpan, a Nigerian living with HIV. I'll be back again No, I would not be here next week, Monday. Let me put that out now. Unfortunately, I won't. Emmanuel Onwoka is staring at me, looking like I've announced some breaking news that cannot be announced. Well, I'll be out of Lagos for a couple of days next week. I've got a training to attend, so I would not be here most likely next week, Monday. So I'm leaving you in better hands. Emmanuel Onwoka and Yvonne Ohaifu will definitely do a good job. On behalf of my producers, did I say Blessing? Yes, I wanted to talk about Blessing, but Blessing is not one of my producers. Precious Nena Okon, and of course Emmanuel Onwoka, and the rest of the news team who have put in this brilliant package. I say thank you. But of course, I will not fail to say a happy birthday to someone I love so much. My younger sister, who was a year older 2 days ago, Mrs. Blessing Biose. Happy birthday to you. She almost swore for me that I did not wish her happy birthday on air yesterday when I saw her. So I'm doing it now so that she can give me all the banga soup that I need. Anyway, Lagos, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Until then, have yourselves a wonderful evening. My name is Ufuoma Egbamuno.
Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.